Hey everybody, Phil from Two Forks Woodworks here. I wanted to take you for a little tour through our shop. Obviously, it's just a little basement shop. We don't do a lot of real big jobs. We've got like a bath vanity over there that's ready to be picked up. We've done some whole kitchen jobs, but those sort of overwhelm our shop. So we try and stick more to the smaller things. We do some built-ins, butcher block countertops, tabletops, things like that. We also have in the works a chair that we're designing and building and just trying to figure out sort of how to replicate that because it's kind of a complicated thing. So for some context, that's what we do here at Two Forks Woodworks. We also like to repurpose a lot of wood, so we do a lot of milling of wood. In fact, the faces of the drawers on that counter, on that bath vanity, were from piece of maple that somebody had laid down in their attic so that they could put Christmas decorations. I think it was a leaf to a table at one point. So we use that. Saves the tree, saves the customer a little money, and just makes us feel a little better about our woodworking. So that's the type of stuff we do here to give you some idea of the equipment that we use for projects like that. Now, if you're just a hobby guy and you don't need all the bigger stuff, then that's fine too. But that's what we do, and we'll show you the equipment that we have. We're here. It's not a real big table saw, but it's always done the job that we needed to do. If you're doing bigger things and you have the room, a fence that goes a little further than 30 inches would be good. In fact, our next saw that we're going to be getting soon will have a 36-inch fence. If you can go to 52, good for you. We obviously can go nowhere near that. So we're gonna get the 36-inch fence just so we can rip 34.5-inch sides for our cabinets. But this thing's been suiting us well for a long time. 1.75 horse, it's 110, so we didn't need to run 220 to it. And it's always done a really good job for us. We obviously make accessories for it. We've got our cross-cut sled. You've probably seen a million videos on how to make these. This also was repurposed material. This was a leaf to a table that was, again, in the same person's attic. They didn't want it. They were going to throw it in the dumpster. So we made this. These things are really valuable. If you don't have one of these, watch one of the 1,000 videos on YouTube about how to make one of these. It really is a game changer for your table saw. Dust collection, you got to have that, particularly in a basement. This one has 2 ports on it. Just make sure when you're using this that you cover the other port. We actually have a little piece of wood because we don't have any gates on ours that we just stick on the table saw when we're running our planer. Otherwise, it really doesn't pull hard enough to suck the chips out of the planer, so we cover that up. You just got to remember, if you do this, to take it back off again. The dust collector doesn't like it when both the ports are covered. It'll let you know it barely inflates, so make sure you take this off. But it's a good little tip if you don't have gates on your dust collection. The other thing that I saw on YouTube a couple times, this guy, Bourbon Moth, I think is the name of this shop. And he's a really good woodworker, and he has a tremendous amount of equipment. A really nice table saw, bigger than this contractor saw. And I was watching him cut a 4x8 sheet of plywood onto a roller because he had no outfeed table. And I'm watching this in horror because I can't even imagine cutting a 4x8 sheet of plywood onto a roller. And by a roller, if you don't know, I mean this. So he has no outfeed table. He's got this set up. The piece he didn't want, it just sort of fell off to the side, and the piece he wanted landed on top of this. It was scary. So when you're setting up your shop, figure out where your table saw is going to be and where your outfeed table is going to be. It's absolutely essential. Ours doubles as a table that we build on, which can be a nuisance sometimes when you forget you have to cut something and come back, but you've got a big cabinet sitting there. So if you have the room to put a bench up, then that's great. But absolutely make yourself an outfeed table. Ours is just plywood and 2x4s. It's nothing special. We store stuff underneath it. The Bourbon Moth guy, after I was watching him cut that 4x8 sheet of plywood, then the next episode, I think it was, made the most beautiful outfeed table I've ever seen with drawers and all kinds of stuff on it. So why he didn't do that in the first place, I'd seen a lot of his videos and he had no outfeed table. It was amazing. But now he does, and good for you, man. I'm glad you're safe. So this, I think, is probably the first place you start. I know there's ways that you could probably get away with not having a table saw. If you're just doing period furniture, Windsor chairs, or you're going to do smaller stuff, you probably get away with just using the bandsaw. maybe a panel saw. But it seems to me sometimes people just get to a point where they're just trying not to have table saws. They may be a little bit frightened of them. This one is not, I wouldn't be intimidated by a table saw. Just don't do anything stupid with it. You use push sticks. It's handy to have metal ducts above with magnets. And always be careful with these things. If you have a saw stop, it's not going to cut your fingers off, even better. They're a little pricey, but that's actually going to be our next saw. We're buying it. We're not sponsored by them. So that's where I would start. I would start with the table saw. I've seen a lot of videos on YouTube about joining boards without using a joiner. Now, I understand if you don't have the room for one of these, or you can't afford one, whatever the case may be, then yeah, go ahead and set up jigs on your table saw and all of that to join a board and all these other videos that I see that are just not using joiners. I use a joiner. I love this. It's scary sometimes when you're running stuff through there, but they work great. And they work great when they're set up right. And there's a million videos, I'm sure, on YouTube about setting these up. Make sure that your blades are obviously square to this or perpendicular or whatever the term is. Don't ever run this without a guard, or you're going to count in fractions like I do, because I cut my finger off on a joiner, not this particular one, but a different one. And if you ask a lot of woodworkers what tool you don't want to cut your finger off on, not that you want to cut your finger off on any of them, but I bet they'll say the joiner, because it just grinds your finger off. So be careful. Use push sticks, make sure that that's on, and this is a really handy tool. Now, I mentioned before that we do a lot of repurposing of wood. We do a lot of milling of wood. So this is actually a great tool for milling wood. We have a planer that we also use, but it's in conjunction with this. So if you've got a board that's crooked like that, you're not going to get it out when you're using a planer, because the planer basically will flatten the board out. It'll make it thinner, but it'll stay curved like that. But when you run curved board through here, you can cut this high spot and that high spot off, and you keep cutting that high spot off until the bottom's flat. You'll still have a hump on the top, but then you can go and run the board through the planer. It won't flatten it down. It'll just keep cutting that little mountain off until it becomes flat. That's what I like to use this for, because if we got some curved boards, or crooked, I think is what they call them, then this will take that out. It also does the job of joining boards. I mentioned that we do a lot of butcher block stuff. We do tabletops. So we're gluing a bunch of boards together, and those, where that glue up is, obviously has to be nice and square to each other. So this does the job. Again, you could probably use the router. You could probably find a way to set jigs up so that you can do it. But for my money, this is a really great tool. Oh. This is one tool I think you could probably get away with not using in your shop if you're not doing, if you don't really have any need to route anything. You don't have to have a bench top like this one. You probably get away with just having a little handheld router if you're just rounding over edges just a little bit. If that's all you really ever do, then I wouldn't bother with one of these. But we use ours quite a bit to make doors. These are the router will cut that bit in one edge and that bit on the other edge, and then they go together like that. Quarter-inch panel fits in there. So we couldn't get away with not having one of these, because we use it all the time. This is an expensive one, but we fit it in here, and it works out pretty nicely for us. So we don't have a terribly powerful router, but it definitely does the job. If I had to do it again, I'd probably get a shaper, just because it's a little more powerful. I don't think it spins as fast. We can get some bigger bits. This guy's pretty noisy too, which is something to consider when your wife's office is right there. But this one does the job. And I would say again, if you're not making doors, or you don't have any real need to route anything except for rounding over little edges, then I'd probably stay away from that and get one of the smaller routers. We do dados on this sometime when I'm too lazy to set the dado stack up on. You know, we have a whole bunch of bits that are in this cabinet that I can't get open. That does all kinds of stuff for us, router bits for, like I said, dados and panels and all kinds of things like that. So I would say on a scale of 1 to 10 for your average shop, I'd give this about a 5. This one used to be just a benchtop model, and it had some stamped steel legs that were, you know, like newborn deer. It wasn't the greatest tool ever. So we took those off and put it in the top. But I did see when I was looking at a book about Norm Abrams, he had one of these in his shop with stamped steel legs. And I just couldn't believe it. Maybe he was having a hard time that month or something, but it was not a fantastic tool. It was probably given to him, let's be honest. But I hope he's upgraded his router setup, because originally that wasn't the greatest thing. And while I'm on the subject of Norm, obviously the guy's an icon, and everybody knows who he is, and he's a fantastic woodworker, and probably did more to advance the idea of woodworking being cool and remodeling houses being cool than anybody else. Now, you know, everybody and their brother's making a television show about remodeling houses. But the one thing about Norm that always drove me nuts, and really probably more the production of this old house than anything else, is Norm would come into some house, you know, and it's 100 years old, and you know the ceiling's going like this all over the place, and he'd go to put a piece of crown molding up, and you know if it was you or me, it would be like dunk, 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 and you'd be trying to figure out how to fix this problem. And you know, he'd make one cut, and like, oh, just like that, slide into place. And it always drove me nuts, because if you've ever tried to put crown molding up, never, ever goes like that. And I've always wanted to see like a real video of Norm Abrams, say like after the Red Sox had just won the World Series, and he's been out all night drinking pina coladas or whatever that guy drinks with his buddy Tom Silva, and they're out partying until the break of dawn, and he's got to go to work the next day, and he wakes up and he's got a blistering headache, and you know, he goes and there's no coffee, he didn't make any coffee, so he stumbles out to his truck, goes to start his truck, left the light on, battery's dead, so he's got to go wake his wife up, and she comes around with her little Toyota Corolla and jump starts his truck so that he can get to work. Gets to work, finally he's up there, and he goes to put some piece of molding up. It's the last piece, he can't wait to be done with this, and he inches it, cuts it an inch too short. Off to the lumber yard he's got to go, because they don't have any more. He gets to the lumber yard, they don't have any more, and it's going to be 2 weeks before they get it. So he's got to go back and tell the customer, it's going to be a little while before we finish this. That's the video I want to see from Norm Abrams. Not that, oh, it's perfect every single time video, because that just isn't reality.